Good day again. It is August 7th. I'm here with Derek Phelps, who's helping me. He's a civilian, like we all are. And we want to know something that's very important. And the prelude that I just filmed, I hope to have incorporated into this video. But right now, we're going to continue on with some thoughts that we generated in anticipating how important it is to know where we came from. So, Derek, any of you have a question?
Sure. Yeah, so keeping all that in mind, what can viewers expect in this video series?
Well, in itself, you're going to get something fresh, a new idea that is an old idea, a very old idea about how the hemispheres play a role in the evolution of human beings. And I say human beings, I mean, broadly speaking, I'm talking about Homo sapiens. I'm not talking about Homo erectus, because this is a different understanding that was promoted in the 1800s until 1910, when it was virtually set aside, and alone the idea of the peopling of the Americas. So, again, what are the purposes of these videos is to bring fresh light on an old idea. We're promised to do that.
Okay, great. Can you explain, how do you plan to make this an interactive process?
Well, we see people using the format of YouTube and or you know, the BBS, public broadcasting, and the formats that create a forum for this line of discussion. So, in appealing to the general public, I'm trying to let you know that you have a role in science, because science really is for the general public. And if scientists are reluctant to test an idea or admit that they might be wrong, and the only thing that would be wrong with that was being trivial about what we have questions about, to put them away, put them aside, set them aside. These sets of videos do not do that, and it's really an attempt and an appeal for common sense. And I think common sense can be found in the general public, knowing that they want to really have answers in science, and that's what scientists are all about. But sometimes they are reluctant to change their paradigm. AI would tell you that. I've had them tell me that. Help me, okay? I'm asking you, the audience, to participate and help move this idea along. And let's be the leaders. You can't follow everybody, especially if there's maybe a little bit of discrepancy about what's right and wrong, what's true and what's not true. So science is itself a basis for starting and building upon something. When we put a rocket in space, we don't start putting people in the rocket until we know it works. It's a feat of engineering. What these series of papers is they're a series of anecdotes, true ideas that were either dismissed or have now come to light, because we have had 160 years since the dawn of the idea that we have a cultural heritage that is shared throughout the world. So this is a global Eureka moment. It's for everyone. And I don't mean to sound like I'm standing on a soapbox, but by gosh, I think it's important that this idea gets out there. And I've had a lot of people trying to help me, professionals and non. Thank you so much. Again, good question. I hope I've answered that.
Good, absolutely. In the topic that you're bringing forth in this video series, what makes this a current topic of interest?
Well, what really makes it current and as a topic is that I watch the same things that viewers watch if they're following human origins or science or ecology or even politics. Well, we just look at things and we want to see what we can find that's true. So the direction that this aims to go is in finding a resolution. So, you know, if you could repeat that question one more time, I want to make sure I can get this right.
Yeah, the topic for discussion that you're introducing in this video series. Can you just explain what makes it a topic of current interest?
Right. So, I feel, very sadly, that we are being told things that are not true. So, the reason it's current is because we haven't understood the underlying current of what we are watching over and over and over again. That doesn't really do anything to resolve the main issue, which is the antiquity of our being over time. Now we know Homo erectus was continuity is what the argument is in the old world, and the idea of replacement is the alternative view. Woolproff is the arguer for continuity, along with John Hawks and a number of other people who look at Neanderthals as, you know, this is a continuing evolution to get to humans. But this replacement, whether it's out of Africa or out of the Americas or out of Asia, is an alternative that the two are trying to meet, to find common knowledge. And as Jeffrey Clark points out, despite all of the evidence that is out there, only 11% of it is adopted by both paradigms. So what can we do to find guidance that is going to say, Homo sapiens also has continuity, but that continuity can't be traced to the old world far enough back, despite the early questionable, and I mean questionable, fossil evidence is emanating from the African horizon or other horizons, mostly Africa. The point is, we need to know that if it's possible that we have been here since time immemorial, which is what the Native Americans believe, we need to test, that means everyone in the old world has been here from time immemorial. So I'm trying to redirect you to understand this is an opportunity to see something like a flower bloom, but we hadn't just suddenly arrived. We've been in that ground, we've been in this earth for millions of years, and there are footprints to prove it and other ways of proving it, paleontologically also. So we're going to deal with all these scientific aspects, and we're going to try to make this clear. You know, that's where we're headed. Please join us.
Okay, all right. And where do you get inspiration for your ideas? Talk about a little bit about your sources.
Well, it's interesting because who is a naturalist? I mean, I like to think we're all naturalists. You know, I mean, we practice, loving nature. We grew up as nature. Some of us have, of course, been domesticated more than others, but and some of the world that we use, the plants and the animals, they're domesticated. But nature is a teacher. She is describes everything, and the Native American people have really followed that. You know, they would see how things worked. They know how the beaver act, how the caribou act. If they wanted to make the grasslands, they knew that they had ways of expanding that biome. So, if you wanted to have beaver pelts to sell to Europe, then you knew how to expand the biome for the beaver. There are two competing biomes. But in a sense, nature has been my teacher. I grew up at a school where we did, from the 4th grade on, before I was there, they were taking people camping. Everyone in the school had to go on a backpack trip for 4 days, 3 nights. Oh, what torture. No, not quite. It became such a valuable lesson. I then started exploring more than just the local backcountry of the Ojai Ranger District in the Los Padres Forest, and I went over to Santa Barbara and Santa Barbara County, and I would hike 60 miles with my friends to get to a highway and get back to home in the Ojai District. So I learned things, and I ended up buying a homestead in the middle of the national forest, and from that homestead I took people camping. I bought horses. I know horses, I love horses. There are plenty of good horses out there. I used to be able to throw people on my horses. They didn't even know how to ride. They would be too young. I made sure they fit in the stirrups. They could get the balance. And we took people camping. And what I did during one of those camping expeditions, if you will, just overnighter or basically a couple nights or maybe just a horseback ride, we discovered condors. That was at the peak close to my ranch, and a group of condors, 6, flew over in 1983. And I had camera, I had film, I had a chance to reload my camera. And I had 36, Kodachrome pictures with a zoom lens, and identified 2 of the condor population that they were currently doing a molt count. Molt count is like a 2-year experiment to find the evidence of how many birds are out there. So this was at the end of the molt count, and I helped identify that, those 2 last birds. I subsequently started working with them. I was able to go to the zoo, stand behind the black mirror of glass, and look at the condors in captivity that they had raised from chicks, from eggs. And what makes me a naturalist is I understand nature. And at one point, 2 points actually, the first year they started gathering the eggs, the birds started laying 3 eggs to get another condor to raise, because we were taking the first and second egg. Well, I said, after the second year, I saw that they were taking the eggs again from the nest. I went to them directly and I said, that is so great. They're laying a 3rd egg. Let them raise that chick. It is so important to them. You can see they had 2 eggs taken. They still wanted to raise young. And I went to the Sierra Club to try to get the Audubon and Fish and Wildlife Service to get them to help me let them know that nature works that way. We need to just give them that opportunity to live their lives and not have their eggs taken from them. Well, the birds took off. 6 of the 8 breeding pairs of the 8 condors that were paired, 6 of them left. And I had to point out into the Ventura County Press that, oh, by the way, they pointed out that we're going to have to take the birds out of the wild because we can't find them. Well, the reason they can't find them is because they had been chased off after 2 years of having their eggs taken. So I still get along. I got along to the point that I actually wrote a report. I asked them, what is the criteria for releasing California condors into the wild? Because I think you need to do that over in the Sisquoc Condor Sanctuary behind Santa Barbara. At the time, I had been working with them to build the sanctuary in the Suspe near Fillmore, which is way too close to urbanized, and they would go to the dumps to get food. They smell stuff and they go to the dump. Well, they went and placed the condors in that were raised in captivity, that had gotten to full age, into the condor sanctuary in the Suspe, in the Sisquoc, which means condor in Chumash. And I took, after writing the report, I ended up with my friend Tony Alvis, who's no longer with us, and he and I took 10 biologists into the condor sanctuary for 4 days. It's like I used to do when I was in high school. We took them in for 4 days to the base of the condor sanctuary in the San Rafael Wilderness. And what happened was they came to the realization, sitting around the fire, that they didn't have time to have a court battle over whether to remove the condors that were out there and start a captive breeding program. They threw the landmark, if you will, court case that was about to proceed, and wasted the time that would have been to go through this court case, and they threw that into the fire, and they decided to begin the condor recovery program. And eventually, the first release site that they did release condors into the wild was Lion Canyon, at the base of what I had written this report about. Orographics and the biologist access, public access or lack of, those kind of things that were important in in deciding whether a site is suitable. And what's amazing is those first condors that they released laid an egg, and they raised it. They fed it, even though they were bred in captivity. And there's something to be said for that, because the Audubon symbol is the whooping crane. And despite all of the efforts and the fact that that's on the door of their vehicles, is that they do not successfully rear young in to this day, is what I understand. But back then, they did not rear their young, so they really weren't self-sufficient. The condor, on the very first attempt, raised their young. So, as a naturalist, I began to see a little bit about how science works. That report that I made was actually published in the Library of Congress. I didn't publish it. It was published because it was valuable. So I now am tackling human origins and the manner in which I have gone to universities and learned what was there, talked to the main anthropologists, but also learned to dig in the current periodical sections. They come to the library every month, every quarter, and then they take those current periodicals every year and they bind them up and put them up in the library. And that's a year's past research for that magazine or that journal. I followed those principles. I made copies at 7 cents a page, and I pilfered this information, took it back to my ranch, and I rediscovered, I would highlight them. And back then in the 1980s and 1990s, I took them to a typist. I hand wrote what I wrote, including the release site criteria on legal ledger paper, yellow paper, and took it to the typist. They put it into Word docs. And ultimately this became printed through mother tongue, as a study of the language and prehistory. They published a lot of what I wrote in the late 1990s, the last millennium. So I tackle science by looking at how it works and what is there that can contribute to knowledge that you have. Where do you get knowledge? You guess something, and if you follow it, you'll find out if it's worthy of following. And I have followed this idea for almost 45, 50 years, but scientifically I've been in these libraries for 45 years. So the answer, who I am, that is in a sense, I think I have credentials. It'll enable me to say, trust me, I think there's something here. And I'm hoping that this audience, my audience here, the audience, it's not my audience, we all want to know where we came from. And that's what I'm saying about that.
Okay, great. Can you cite some of the hard evidence that lends credence to the theory that you're proposing in this video series?
Well, like anything, I think a metaphor or an analogy is appropriate. I love them, but to me, there's a threshold for knowledge. But in that threshold, you need pillars to hold it up. You know, sometimes you need two. Ideally, you want to get four. If you're going to build something you're going to go into, it's like a building or a wiki up. I mean, sometimes you only have one entrance. But the point is, you got to get there, and what are the points of interest that make this science work? First off, I think one of the main pillars is the historical aspect. We believe this, and I will have, when I take this video and I decide to add some images, I'm going to make this very clear for people. You'll see the papers that were written in 2024, 2017, and then the ones that go back to 100 years and 160 years. And these papers that were just written recently are from people in Argentina who knew Florentino Ameghino's work. And so the pillar is the historical aspect that we have set this idea aside and alone have only considered how the New World was peopled. When we know Homo sapiens peopled the old world, that we call it the old world, it's not the real old world. And that's what Borgorni has pointed out in her work. People believe very distinctly that the Americas was a source for Homo sapiens in the old world. But what's the other pillar that's going to hold this other doorway up, this threshold to get through? It is the historical aspect that after 160 years, to quote Jeffrey Clark and Willamette in 1985, we are, in quote, we are no closer to solving the human origins than we were 160 years ago. And the reason is we have two dynamics. One is replacement, and one is continuity. And Homo erectus offers continuity. But at the very breaking point, when we arrived in the old world, that is the difference between replacement theory, whether it be out of Africa again, or out of Asia or Europe. So the point is, we haven't included the Americas for that replacement. If you do that, then you make the argument that Homo sapiens is actually, just like Homo erectus, it is not convergent evolution, but continuity. But continuity of the human Homo sapien form. We're not modern. We've always been Homo sapiens. Recent to the old world, we might apply the word modern. Modern implies it's short-lived. We have always been thinking, speaking languages, making fires, traversing the environment of the New World, which is hard to get out of, in deference to our sudden arrival in the Old World. And we'll explain many of these factors, but the threshold for this study is the historical aspects that was already discussed and a major form of discussion, and that we're not any closer today. And why? Because we set the idea aside.
Okay. Okay. And what about, do you have any circumstantial evidence you'd like to bring forth?
Well, circumstantial evidence is something that, if you're investigating something, you try to believe that you can either prove it or disprove it. But along the lines, if you are talking to a professor and you walk in there and say, well, I proved it, you know, well, you're probably going to get the door slammed in your face, okay? So you have to you have to experiment with the experiment and you know, like put the dye in the water and see if it casts, you know, does something, if it turns colors, you know, or if it turns colors from what is murky back to clear. Because we really shouldn't have the difficulties we're having. And so as much as the circumstantial evidence is that we recently to the old world, that the hard evidence is the genetics, the archaeology, and how to interpret it. So we're going to go beyond just understanding something but explaining many of the factors and places that are very important to understand migrations, source populations, and our distribution, how we got where we are. Here we are. We're all over the planet. And we need to know the impact of not knowing when we should be knowing where we came from and our cultural orientation of life on Earth. And so circumstantial evidence is important, but it's not like the hard evidence.
Okay. And from an outsider's perspective, what are some of the drawbacks of this?
I think the drawback for people who might have picked this idea up, and I know some have, is that they didn't follow through. And one of the drawbacks is that science itself has a tendency to adopt things. And if you adopt something that you're not going to waver from, then you need to understand the process of scientific exploration. I mean, you know, you can go to try to discover the South Pole. I mean, you know, you go out, drop yourself on the edge of the ice, and you start walking around. You know, you got to figure out where you're going. I mean, you got to have a compass. You got to have guidelines. You got to know the wind. Otherwise, it's all white. You're not going to know what's going to, you know, what direction. There's no trailhead ahead of you. So, at this time, all of these years later, to have some idea, some perspective reborn, which is really what I'm doing, it becomes the most difficult object of ascent, of getting to the top, of not just getting to the top for getting to the top. I want to enjoy the view. I want everybody to enjoy the view. I'm just here by myself, and I believe, more than believe, I'm convinced. But, you know, I'm convinced we need to even look at it. So the idea of getting scientists to look at it is really what I'm appealing. Everyone here in these videos, and those who are scientists who might be watching this, and I hope they are, to understand, hey, you know, there's careers to be made here. But not only that, there's the issue of where we came from, which is for the layperson, for those people who want to know. And we want to know. And I want to help get it there. So that is the most difficult thing that I face, is scientific authoritarianism. And I have to just leave it at that. I love what I read. I know the scientists I know, but I try to put myself in their shoes. This is, you know, like, well, I'm going to risk my career, some kind of, it's not far-fetched, but they could consider it. But once they've been with me long enough, they begin to realize it's not too far-fetched, you know. So I'm not the one with the original idea, but getting people to adopt it today, that's my greatest hurdle. And I'm appealing to people to watch the Global Eureka Moment series. I'm going to have a lot of ideas to discuss, and maybe in the next video we're going to discuss where some of the specific lines of evidence lie. So again, thank you for saddling up with me. We're going to have a nice ride. We can get to the top of the mountain, and we're going to enjoy it. And it's going to be fun. I hope to believe it. I like to have fun, but I also like to be serious. So you catch both sides of me.